Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Living Astrology with Janet. It's time to grab your cup of coffee or your tea, sit back and relax while we chat about all of the things that are going on up in the sky above us for the week ahead, as we are headed down the last week of the month of January. And of course, in football terms, that means championship games. And I'm wearing the Seahawks because we are going to the Super Bowl, baby. It was quite the wild game, I'll tell you that. And I nail biter right till the end. But in the end, of course, the Seahawks were victorious. Thus, the reason I wear the hat today. And on top of that, my friend Debbie out there in Florida, who is a staunch Patriots fan, is excited because the Patriots are also going to the Super Bowl. It'll be a matchup such as what we had in 2014. And hopefully this time Seahawks come out on top in that game. No, I see Debbie already with her Go Pats. It'll be an epic game to be sure. Yesterday's almost feels like it was a hurdle that we had to cross, and one that would be more difficult for us than the Patriots. Not to disparage the Patriots at all, but the Rams are notorious when we play the Rams, that there is always these weird things that happen, and they are a very difficult team. All right, enough about football. How is everybody doing out there today? It's very cold in some parts of the U.S. It's very cold here, but it has been unusually dry. I think we've had like 15 days of very cold temperatures. Very cold as in there's ice everywhere that accumulates at night, but no rain. And hopefully that's going to change, because it feels very odd to me to not have rain in January. But sometimes we get this block of time, right, where the weather flip-flops from East Coast to West Coast. And that just seems to be what we're in right now, right? So today we have some major news out in the world up in the astrology world, with Neptune, the planet, the god of the oceans, of earthquakes, of spirituality, of the depths of our humanity, our divine human connection, moving out of Pisces for the last time and into the sign of Aries, where he will be for the next, till 2038. So for a very long time yet ahead of us. And it signals an epic shift, a mythic shift. And on top of that, we have our Aquarius energy igniting with a Mars-Pluto connection today and tomorrow and the next day, and actually for a while, because they don't, there's like a 10 or 15 degree connection between those two. And that means that there could be lots of different things that we see going on in the world, some that are fiery, some that are very airy. So it'll be an interesting time to be sure. And as well, we are getting ready to switch the Human Design Week, where we move into some very sensitive emotional areas in the human design. And then as well, later in the week, we have a Mercury conjunct Venus transit, and that should hopefully make things a little better, make things a little easier. That remains to be seen, because it just seems like there are a lot of flashpoints going on out there right now. So let's start with Neptune re-entering Aries, because this is the return of sacred fire. Anytime a planet comes to the 0 degree mark of a sign, or especially Aries, it begins a new chapter. But this isn't just a new chapter. This is almost like a whole new book, because it's the very first degree of the entire zodiac. And later this week, Saturn follows Neptune. Actually, it'll be early in February. Saturn follows Neptune into this very same degree, where they make their conjunction. And even though they've been close to conjunction many times during the past 8 months, it'll be their actual conjunction. And that should signal something pretty interesting too. So this morning, I want to spend some time helping everybody understand Neptune and understand Aries, and put the two together into what might become a new mythic story. Now, Neptune hasn't been here in a very long time. He has a 165-year cycle. And so the last time that Neptune actually entered Aries was during the Civil War. So in the in the 1860 to 1865 range, where he spent another, 12 years or so in that sign. And when he enters into Aries, we enter a time where spirit wants expression, not abstractions, right? It becomes almost a whole new hallmark in our evolution, if you will. And there's no more dreaming from the sidelines, if you will. It's a more of an outsourcing of courage, of the action, and of, in a way, the combining of spirit in the human template. And Aries is the first spark in the world. It's the first spark. It's the cry of I am. And it's the moment that life says, I exist and I will move, right? Mars is the ruler of the sign of Aries, and Mars always rules action, forward momentum, movement. So Neptune, of course, is a planet that dissolves, and he blurs those boundaries, right? It's hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. He erodes the illusions that we have been holding about ourselves, about our world, about our beliefs and our ideologies. And he asks us to surrender what we thought was real in favor of something more meaningful, something more deep. And when Neptune meets Aries, the question really becomes, who are you when the masks fall away, right? Who are you when all of the accoutrements disappear? And what are you willing to act on once they do? Who are you willing to be and step up to the plate and live when all of those masks disappear? Now, in a way, Neptune in Aries is the archetype of the spiritual warrior. But not the kind that's driven by ego necessarily, or even by conquest, even though that's potentially there. That may show up first, which I think we see, right? We see that in our world, where this energy of conquest and so forth, and the assault on sovereignty and the imperialistic old energies coming back to the surface. But eventually this energy becomes about aligning with the soul, and courage with compassion, and instinct with intuition. It has a much deeper meaning than just what we see superficially. But now every planet, every sign has a shadow side. And this, Neptune is not immune to that kind of energy as well. So often when a planet moves into a sign, what we first see is maybe the spark of the potential in that sign, followed by the shadow expression of the energies in that sign. So let's be honest here. Neptune in Aries can also be very confusing. It could be volatile. It could be reactive. And we may see things like false heroes and spiritual saviors, or that we're, as people, looking for that spiritual savior. We might see ideological crusades fueled by emotion rather than wisdom. Even though Aries isn't necessarily an emotional sign, it is immature energy. It's youthful energy. It's a dynamic energy. And identity confusion can be masked as certainty, right? We are certain that this is how things should be, or where they should go, and who should be in charge. But then that identity gets confused. And then we might find people fighting for something without knowing why. Why do we keep sticking up for the ugliness out there in the world? Why is that happening? And Neptune can be intoxicating, right? We have intoxication energy. Aries can rush. It can push. It can try to force things into being. And yet, together, Neptune and Aries can be very inspiring. It can lift us up. It can fire our imaginations, or it can inflame the issues that are out there in the world. And I think right now we see a bit of this inflaming of things. And this is why discernment becomes a key word, becomes, in fact, sacred work for each one of us in this era, right? This is a new era that's being birthed, one that demands discernment on each one of our parts. It demands heart, right? It demands something greater. The invitation Now, there's an invitation for every one of us at this point to become embodied spirit. What would it look like if spirit were running the ship, steering the ship, as it were? The higher expression of Neptune and Aries is not belief, right? It's not the ideology, it's the embodiment, right? And the transit of Neptune through Aries is going to be about living our spirituality through actions. Or can we even do that? We may speak one truth in spirit and we feel like we're one, and that we're, that we accept one another as we are, and that we are tolerant. But do we live that? Do we see that happening out there in the world? And then can you initiate something new in your life from alignment rather than reaction, rather than that knee-jerk reaction that happens on the emotional side, in particular with Aries, because it is so youthful and so dynamic and so immature in its expression. And the other question here is, can you tolerate not knowing who you're becoming while you're becoming it, right? Because on some level, there may be a lot of confusion about who am I, right? The whole identity issue is up for grabs in every one of us, because Chiron is also in Aries. Chiron, the wound around who are we? Who are we collectively? And who are we as individuals? So this is not going to be a time of passive faith. This is a time for lived truth, right? Each of us stepping into that lived truth. Now, this actually fits in quite nicely with what we're going to be talking about in the rest of the broadcast here today, too, because we have a new week, Human Design Week, that is beginning. And this is in the gates 19 and 25. Or 19, and 33. The Earth will be in 33. And these are very much about attuning to the future, attuning to what, is out there in the morphogenetic fields. And as well, the gate 33 then is about retelling, reshaping the story. It's historical. What is the reshaping of the story? And then we have Neptune and Saturn later in the week, both joining in the gate 25, which is called the gate of spirit, asking us to mature spiritually, and not just awaken, but mature our spiritual expression. So Neptune in Aries today sets this tone. And by the way, that happens at 9:36 my time. So just about an hour and 15 minutes or so from now, right? So be ready, guys. You'll feel maybe the shift. I noticed some people out there telling me that they feel sick this morning or they have a headache this morning. And when big shifts like this happen, it does impact our physicality, especially our projectors out there, our reflectors out there, and anybody who has an open spleen may be very impacted by these energies as they shift and change. So if you're one of those kind of people, then likely some kind of physical impact might be in your experience for this day. Now, also, this is Aries, or Neptune and Aries, setting this tone for us to act from soul, not from impulse, right? Aries is impulsive energy. So in a mature, responsible sort of way, we are being asked to act, but act from spirit, act from the higher self, act from our more Christ-like being, right? Our beingness, from this higher potential, not from fear. There's a lot of reactive energy out there from fear. And what is it? Fear of the other, fear of takeover, fear of what? Because all of the ugliness that's even going on in this country right now, and probably in countries around the world right now, in that outer world as a collective, is about fear. Fear that others are taking our resources, fear that there's not enough for us, or fear that they're going to take away our guns. Whoa, that's a big deal, right? So lots of fear. And we need to rise above that fear and see things from a more spiritual point of view, not from the illusion, that, that people are going to take things, our toys, away from us, or that other people are going to undermine our lives or our country and things like that. So, and while that doesn't say that there aren't problems in those areas, it does say that we have to approach solutions to those problems from a higher self, not from this low fear-based self. Because as you can see, as what's happening in this country, but also in other countries, if you react from that lower place of fear, it brings reactive energy out in all parties, where if we could approach things from a higher self in a sense of, what's the higher spirit at work here, then the solutions become more apparent, and they become more equalized, and they become more fair. So it's a big moment for all of us to shift how it is that we approach problem solving, decision making, and calling up our true identity. And Neptune in Aries here asks us not just to dream a new world, but to have the courage to create it, to live as if it's possible, as if it's already happening. Not to tap in so much to the uglies that we see, although they're there, but to live as if the new world, the peaceful world, is already here, right? And that's a huge thing for all of us, because it's really hard when you're getting a steady diet of Fox News to see just the ugly, to see just this narrow view of what's happening, or any of the newses. I'm saying Fox, but any of those newses, you're just seeing, this tunnel vision, basically, of what it is they want you to see. Instead, we have to step back out of that and see this bigger picture. All right. I'm going to stop for a minute and say good morning to everybody and find out if you have any questions about any of this that's going on. First out there this morning, I saw Julie. Good morning to you, Julie. And Debbie, of course. Go Pats. Go Seahawks. Teddy, +5 against the Pats. I don't know what that means. I mean, we're favored to win. I think that's what you're saying. Good morning, J-Lo. Good morning, Christine Buckingham. Thank you very much. Terry, good morning. Teddy, good morning. And Amanda, good morning to you. Love the hat. Thank you so much. I stole this off my daughter's couch last night and said, I'm going to wear that tomorrow while I'm broadcasting, because I don't normally wear hats. Jackie, or this is probably J-Lo, says, so funny. I just received an alert that it will start snowing in 1 hour. Yeah, the East Coast, you guys are getting it. And Debbie said in Florida, something like a 50-degree drop in temperature. That is crazy. Congratulations for your team winning. Thank you, J-Lo. It's been since 2014. It's about time, right? Now, let's go on to the human design aspect of all of this, because, we've had to get very familiar with the gate 25, and I don't know if you guys have really landed with that. Gate 25 is a gate that sits on the identity center in the human design chart. Let me add this to the stage here. Do make it bigger. Okay, so it sits right here in this center diamond that you can see. And the gate 25 is called the gate of spirit, and it reaches down. The identity center is often called the seat of the soul in human design. And as Neptune re-enters Aries in human design, he does so through this gate 25 spirit. And this matters a lot because it sets the tone. It's telling us what is the lived truth that Neptune and Aries is bringing us to. And this is the core of who you are. And there are 4 gates of loves. Actually, we could say that all the gates on the identity center are gates of love, but there are 4 gates of love on this human design identity center. It's the one that's a diamond. And because I'm not sure if you're seeing my cursor or not this morning. And the gate 25 is called the gate of the love of spirit, or just plain spirit. And we have the gate 46, which is the gate of the love of the body, or the embodiment gate. Then we have the gate 15, which is the love of humanity, or the greater energy of compassion. And then we have the gate 10, which is self-love. So the identity center is definitely a center that brings us love and direction in our lives. So when we have a major outer planet sitting at the gate of love of spirit, it tells us something huge about the era of time that we are living through. And this is not about belief systems or philosophy. So this isn't about your religion or your beliefs. This is about the innocence of being. In the I Ching, this really does show up as innocence. In 25, this is the gate where we can kind of almost, erase the slate and start fresh, start new, with a much more spiritual orientation to how we go through our lives, but also how we treat one another. Now, at the gene keys level, the gate 25 is so interesting, right? Because it takes us on a profound journey. All the gene keys do, but this is a journey from the shadow of constriction to the highest energy of universal love. And we do that through the energy of the gift of acceptance. So when Neptune, the planet of dissolution, compassion, and transcendence and spirituality, moves through the gate 25, it begins dissolving the constrictions around the self. Now, this is where identity softens, where defenses thin, and where the heart remembers something ancient. But we have to get out of the shadow of constriction in order for that to happen, right? And so right now, the outer world, very constricted looking, and it seems like getting smaller and smaller and more tight as we go on. And the remembrance here, the bigger energy is to remember that universal love, that love itself, is the organizing principle behind the whole of the universe, and it is the only thing that's real. Love is real. Fear is not. It is false evidence appearing real. Now, in the shadow, the constriction of the self can feel like spiritual injury, or that you're being not tolerated or accepted. And it's where you might feel like you're cut off from love or from meaning in your life. You might experience like you're carrying the unconscious wounds around rejection or abandonment. So the gate 25 people out there might carry those actual wounds, right, in identity. And then they can shut down their heart. They protect their heart by closing it. So in constriction, or in the lower, shadow level of Neptune at the gate 25, people are shutting down their hearts and protecting it by closing it. And then they also can be defining themselves by their past pain, by our past wounds. And Neptune here can really surface those wounds. It can bring up the wounds of the collective of humanity, the collective, maybe the bigger, collective is in a nation, or collective is in the world, but also your own personal wounds. And this really isn't about punishing. This isn't to make you wrong. It is about healing, right? Eventually, this is about healing something. And at times, this may feel raw. And that's because the ego doesn't quite know who it is anymore, right? The ego is like, what is up here, right? Something is changing, something is softening. And that's because Neptune here is gently saying, you are more than the story that you've been telling yourself, right? Individually, but also from the standpoint of a people, you are more than the story that you have been telling yourself, or telling about yourself. It's so fascinating that this happens within the same week where the sun and earth in human design move to the gates 19, also on the root center down here, 19, the gate of attunement, and the gate 33 up on the throat center, which becomes the gate of the retelling of the story, right? Retelling of the story. So we'll get more into that in a moment. Let's look at the gift here. The gift in the 25 is very interesting as well, because it is called the gift of acceptance. And, gate 25, as it moves out of the shadow and into the gift, something really beautiful happens. Acceptance doesn't mean approval. It doesn't mean that, you're somehow right in what you do. It means that you're making space within for what is, right? For how things are, and not trying to make it something that it's not. So this becomes this moment in time, this snapshot in time, where you stop fighting who you've been and you soften toward humanity, right? You soften. The gate that pairs with the 25 in human design is the 46, the gate of embodiment. The body even begins to soften in response to humanity. And you allow yourself to be imperfect, but still worthy, right? Still worthy. Your worth does not come from what you do or who you are. It's intrinsic. It's intrinsic, right? Neptune in the gate 25 teaches us that true spirituality is not purity. It's presence. And in presence, we have our faults And we have our gifts, we have our shiny moments, we have our ugly moments, but it's all there. You don't become more spiritual by fixing yourself because you're not broken. You become more spiritual by accepting yourself, how you are. And that doesn't mean that tomorrow you can't change and be something different, right? Because chances are the more that you accept yourself, the more you see what's potentially possible for you, the possibilities. Now, when we get to the Siddhi, the highest expression of the gate 25, it's universal love. And this is love without conditions. I'll love you if you're, not an illegal immigrant. I'll love you if you're not gay. I'll love you if you are a normal, everyday person. I'll love you if you do what I say or if you be who I want you to be. It's love without contracts. It's love without the if only, right? It's full on, I accept you, I love you, I accept everything as it is. And Neptune here reminds us that love is not something that is to be earned. It's something we remember. We remember the higher expression of love. Love, right? Love is real. And Aries initiates us into this, right? And this is why Neptune in Aries gate 25 is so powerful, because it really initiates us into this new level of loving energy. But Neptune also dissolves. So it dissolves boundaries, it dissolves the layers between people, and it dissolves anything of a structure that isn't supported through this spiritual energy. And gate 25 reunites us with the heart of being. Now, I don't know if humanity is ready for this full-on universal love yet. I'm not sure, because this is soul courage. This is the bravery that we each have to embrace in order to remain open in a world that teaches us to armor up, such as what we're doing right this minute, it seems, right? So this is soul courage, and it's asking each one of us to open our hearts to that level of courage, right? I had a friend that always used to say, the world is an illusion, but it seems so real, right? So all of the fighting and the ugliness that we see seems so real. But what underneath it is all about the illusion, right? The illusion that love isn't there, love isn't present. Love is present. We just have the soul courage to open up our hearts and to live from that space. Now, Saturn's role in all of this, because as I said, later in the week, Saturn also moves into the gate 25, out of the gate of crisis and turbulence and into the gate of the love of self, or the love of spirit. And as he moves into that gate, joining Neptune, Saturn says, you don't just awaken to truth, you actually live it. You have to build the scaffolding for it and the structure of it and the form that will be the embodiment of it. So this is about spiritual integrity. Saturn brings this piece of being ethical, being in integrity, being true to the heart of the soul, which is love. Walking your talk. Right? That's, on a very human level, it becomes about walking your talk, letting love shape your choices and your boundaries and your responsibilities. And together, Neptune and Saturn, who are not quite in their conjunction in terms of the astrological degree, but they are by the gate energy and the gene key energy of the love of spirit, they ask us, can we stay open and grounded, compassionate and discerning, both spirit-led and responsible? Because this is not naive innocence, right? Remember I said the gate 25 in the I Ching was about innocence. This is earned innocence, where we can really just open up the heart to purity of expression of love, right? It's a tall ask, and I feel a little like this is my whole reason for being on this planet, is to love, right? I don't know what you guys think about that in terms of your own personal life, but the sun for me sits at the gate 25 in my design. So it feels like to me that is the essence of what it is that I'm here to bring, even if it doesn't feel attainable at this moment in time. Even if we don't see it out in the outer world at this time, it is who we are, right, at a very real level. All right. Questions. Let me go back and see how everybody's doing with this morning before I get into the historical context of all of this. Good morning, Jana and Jacqueline Tyler. Good morning to you. So no questions yet. This is good. If you have questions, please put them down there. So as you know, we've talked about this last year when Neptune first entered Aries, just for his very short-term visit there. We talked about the historical context and that when last Neptune entered into Aries in the 1860s, it was the time of the Civil War in the USA. And it was a profound rupture, probably one of the most profound ruptures between people in American history. And in fact, Neptune entered Aries literally around the same time that the first shots were fired at Fort Sumter in late 1861. And it remained in that sign through all of the conflict and through the aftermath of the conflict. So the whole Reconstruction era also was a part of Neptune in Aries. So the era of Neptune last time was defined by identity fractures and the question of who counts as a human being with rights. Now, we may not see it as so much about slavery and the white versus the American slaves, right? Not at this moment, but we are seeing that same who counts as a human being with rights if you're an illegal immigrant in this country. Again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying here it is, again, a theme about an identity fracture. And then there's an ideological collision here, right? The trauma of systemic slavery versus the emerging demand for emancipation, again, back at that particular time. So what's the ideological collision happening here now, right? Take a look at that. Now, also during Reconstruction, the aftermath of the Civil War was not pretty, right? It was not a, yay, we won and it's all fixed now. No, it did not work out that way. There was a lot of revengeful things that happened to the Black people in the country at that time, from the North to the South. And it was just, it was a time that I'm so glad that I wasn't living in, or at least that I don't remember if I were living in it. There were long unresolved issues around the rebuilding of a nation. And I don't know that they ever got solved. I don't know that the Reconstruction ever finished, right? I think it just went underground and then comes up at times through civil rights movements, through any of the hashtag Me Too and, the Aries Spring and all of these different movements where they were coming back at a space where people were not equal, right? Where there were these differences between how people were in the hierarchy. And astrologers often look at Neptune's placement symbolically. I mean, that's the idea. Astrology is symbolic. And in Aries, Neptune dissolves old identities and beliefs at the same time that Aries amplifies urgency and action. So we get this idea that something is going away, that there's something, erasing at the same time that there's this urgency and this action that may be misplaced, may not be yet correct. So we have to be very careful because this can be very volatile energy, right? If it's not channeled in a direction of love, it can become very volatile and ugly. And this isn't to say that Neptune causes war, because he does not, right? He's not the god of war, but outer planets don't flip switches. Like, they don't flip the switch and say, okay, now there will be war. But in the symbol language of astrology, Neptune and Aries can correspond with a collective crucible moment where core identity, freedom, and moral values are up for renegotiation. We are renegotiating. And then if we look at the now, right, bring it to today's energy, we have this echo of an identity crisis and the collective response to said crisis. We're living in a time where these long-standing tensions around immigration, enforcement, civil rights are all erupting into public conversation, public consciousness, and grief around this, right? There's grief. For example, and earlier this month when the woman was shot and killed, Renee Nicole Good, a mother and a poet apparently in Minneapolis. Her death sparked this widespread outcry, protests, and intense debate about law enforcement, civil rights, and accountability, right? ICE being accountable to whom? And what's unfolding now isn't a war in the literal sense, like the Civil War, where there's this wide conflict, but the themes resonate basically on that same kind of level, a little bit on a different level, but they're there. Who belongs in our community? Who indeed? How do systems wield power over individuals? How does the system wield power over individuals? And what stories are we telling? Because both sides have stories about justice, about protection, about freedom, and about what it is that we're actually after. And these questions are part of this larger cultural sort of reckoning that is coming up right now. You're living it, right? We're living through it. So Neptune in Aries doesn't signal specific events, right? We can't just say, okay, another civil war is in the offing. So the news headlines necessarily aren't Neptunian in terms of how it is that they show up, but it does frame the cultural background against which they unfold. So it gives us sort of this framework that we can see. So the first one would be about identity and dissonance, where Neptune in Aries reflects this collective pressure to rethink identity, both individually, but collectively, and nationally, right? And earthly, right? And in the 1860s, this was about slavery and human dignity. Today, it shows up in debates around citizenship, rights, and who is protected under the law. It also brings up blurred boundaries, right? The blurred lines, to quote a famous song. Neptune dissolves those clear lines. In civic life, this can really appear as confusion over authority and who's in charge, conflicting narratives about what is happening, and deeply polarized interpretations of what happened, for example, in Minnesota, where there's very clear film about how it went down versus the authorities and their version of it that we are being asked to swallow and take in. Who was at fault? And what did justice look like? Or what does justice look like? Then we have this Aries urgency back behind it that adds this immediate drive, a push to act, to defend, to protect, to resist. So the mix is not just about feeling deeply, but also about feeling compelled to do something about it. This is the flashpoint type thing, right? This is where this Aries impulsivity can create problems, right? So this context isn't about predicting a tragedy unfolding or justifying it astrologically, because that's not what I'm attempting to do here. It's about meaning making. And the Neptune and Aries era is inviting us or asking us about where our collective fears and hopes are shaping our reactions, right? Are you acting from love or are you acting from fear, right? Are you choosing consciousness or are you being unconscious in your choices? And then how does the tension between freedom and force show up in our laws, in policy, and in human dignity? And then what stories are we choosing to carry forward about the identity of America? Right? The Civil War period and today share this backdrop energy, the backdrop of refining and redefining an identity and a moral urgency. Not because the stars cause events, because they're not causal, they are correlations, right? But because these planetary symbols reflect the archetypal currents of energy that are flowing through and show up when societies are in deep flux, where all societies at this point in time, not just the US, are in this deeply changing and transformational time. So the last time Neptune entered Aries, which was around 1861, the US was in the Civil War, wrestling with an identity, wrestling with freedom and human rights. What does freedom mean? Does freedom mean only these people get freedom? Or do we have rights for all human beings? And we're seeing similar pressures today around who is protected, who belongs, and how we respond when justice feels out of reach. Recent events, like, for example, what's happening in Minnesota, um, reveal deep fractures in our social fabric, the things that are taking us out of love, and the fractures that a compassionate society must face honestly. Neptune and Aries asks not just what's broken, but what we choose to build in its place. What are we choosing to build in its place? Is it a fascist regime? Is it an authoritarian dictatorship? Or do we go back to our very roots, which were born in dignity, in the rights of individuals and shared identity, right? So I guess my biggest question in all of this, and probably yours too, is about what can we do as individuals, right? That always bugs me because, I mean, I have a voice, yes, a limited reach, yes. I feel like sometimes I'm preaching to the choir because I know that for the bulk of you out there, you, like me, think that everything that's going on in that world, our world right now, seems so wrong. Um, but when collective energy heats up like this, it's easy to feel small or to feel powerless or even overwhelmed. But astrology and human design both remind us of something essential, and that is that collective shifts are carried on the back of the individual choices that we make. You have power to make choices in how you show up in your world. Ideology aside, right? We might believe different things, but that doesn't mean that we can't love one another, right? Because there are kernels of truth in both sides. No one side has the corner on truth. In fact, I don't know that any side has a corner on truth at this point. Neptune in Aries doesn't necessarily ask that we fight the system head on. So I'm not asking you to collectively go out and, grab your knives and pitchforks, but it asks you to live in integrity with your spirit, even when it's uncomfortable. So what can you do? Well, stay awake and not enraged. Yes, it's ugly what's going on. Yes, it's horrible. And yes, we want these people out of our faces, right? We do not like what's going on. But we have some polarizing energies in our collective now that have to come to peace. And the most radical act right now for you and me is conscious awareness, to be conscious of our choices, to question narratives on all sides, not just one or the other, but on all sides. Notice when fear is being used to provoke a reaction, because that happens a lot. And choose curiosity over certainty, because not one of you truly knows the truth. Not one of us truly knows the full-on truth. And awareness is not passive. It is sovereignty, right? Is you being in your rights. And then let's practice gate 25 in real life, right? Let's be in open-hearted integrity. Gate 25 reminds us that innocence is not ignorance. It's unarmored truth. It's you not having to harden your heart to survive. It is you not having to dehumanize others to protect yourself. Ask yourself, am I acting from love or from fear? Always, always, always. Am I aligned with my values, or am I just reacting? Living your values quietly and consistently is powerful. It's a power you have. Now, use gate 19 wisely. I'm going to go into that in a bit because the gate 19 we haven't quite talked about yet, which is what I really should be going into next, because that's our new human design week. But I also want to remind everybody that we are in the midst of this Aquarian energy right now. And Aquarius energy is future oriented. We are setting the template for what is to come, right? And retelling the stories that we have with wisdom and with, um, the awareness of some of the stories are reactive, that we're reacting to something. So be truthful and be compassionate and be connected. Stay connected. Small, coherent actions ripple outward. Sometimes it's the smallest voice that has the most profound meaning, right? Now, in the last 15 minutes here, let's talk about some other things. So if you have questions about Neptune, if you have any questions about love, let me know. But Mars tomorrow, actually conjuncts Pluto in Aquarius at the gate 41, the gate of imagination. So, anytime Mars and Pluto, anytime those two come together, there seems to be a level of volatility in the world. It is kind of the nature of the two, right? Mars as a catalyst, Pluto as a transformer or empowerer is going to bring some things up to the surface. It's one of the most intense pairings of planets that we get ever, right? Mars in conjunction to Pluto. It happens every 2 years, right? It's not like the sun that conjuncts Pluto once a year. Mars conjuncts Pluto every 2 years, and Mars activates. Pluto concentrates power. It exposes truth and eliminates what can't survive any longer, what we can't take forward, what is not sustainable. So, here's the key shift then. This particular conjunction in Aquarius and in the human design gate 41 of imagination changes everything, right? Is this the seed of the future? This is the seed of the future. And it's the beginning of a cycle. I mean, there's a lot of new beginnings all couched here in this particular week, right? It's the dream before the doing. So in the gene keys, remember we talked about this on Friday, the gate 41 or gene key 41 in the shadow was fantasy. We're living in an escapism, kind of retreating from reality. In the gift, it's anticipation. We can anticipate the future and how it is we want to live that future. And the siddhi, the highest expression, was emanation, right? Where the reflection from within is the face of spirit or the face of God, whatever that God is for you. And this gate carries pressure to experience something new and not reckless, not necessarily reckless new. It's the pressure that says, what if it could be different? What if we could do something based in love rather than fear? So when Mars and Pluto meet here at 3 degrees of Aquarius, the intensity isn't just destructive, it is creative pressure. So while we may see some explosive dynamics out there in the world, the biggest lesson I think for us is to use this energy, this pressure that we feel creatively and in the honoring of imagination and what could be, right? What could be. But this feels dangerous as well, right? This does have this danger. It can feel very volatile because it magnifies anger and power struggles. It magnifies the urgency that we feel, but also of things that are going on in that outer world. And then that brings up a desire to force outcomes. We want to make it happen, right? We want to make it change right now. And in Aquarius, that could look like ideological clashes. It can look like group polarization. It does look like that, doesn't it? My vision versus your vision. And movements that are driven by rage rather than wisdom. And there become flashpoints, right? And at the shadow level of the gate 41, they can slip into fantasy and projecting fears or imagined futures onto the collective. And this is where reactivity lives, when we're projecting outward. So the higher expression of this whole energy, Mars in Aquarius, conjunct Pluto in Aquarius, is anticipation. And it's not impulsive action. It is really this vision that waits for the right circumstances and the right conditions, right people, right place, right time, right solution, right idea to bring something new to our awareness. And Mars here doesn't have to attack, and Pluto doesn't have to dominate, right? They don't have to. Together in Aquarius, they can marshal their energy toward a shared future. We can marshal our anger and we can use it to force something, not to force, but to promote something good, something like collective will. And we can ignite courage to imagine what hasn't existed before, at least not in our lifetime, right? We thought we had peace maybe in the 80s and 90s. Did we? I mean, I don't know. These things were still simmering below the surface, right? It is, for us, revolutionary energy, but not necessarily chaotic revolution. It is more purposeful reorientation. If we do this consciously, we have the potential to get through these times without some kind of horrendous civil war. And by the way, Gate 41, Pluto, Mars come together in the second line. And the second line is a line that has this sort of naturalness about it, this natural ability to call up skills, to to wait to be called out, and instead of forcing or pushing something forward, to lead by presence rather than force. So the healthiest expression of this Mars Pluto and Aquarius conjunction is the I must act, isn't the I must act now. It's more like I will respond when the invitation is clear, when I have a clear signal that we are ready for something new, that we're ready for a new solution. This is really quiet power. It's not domination power. And domination power is dying, right? But right now, it's very much in our faces. And Aquarian focus is on humanity, not ego. It always asks, how does what is happening or what will do serve the whole? How does it serve the collective? And Mars, Pluto, and Aquarius through Gate 41 is asking us to imagine a future that is more humane, not more controlled. This is where you can gently pivot the narrative in your own lives, not by overthrowing anybody or anything, not fighting everyone and everything that's going on, not burning it all down, but imagining something better together, right? Imagining something better together. I'll tell you what, if a leader can arise in this world that would do that, that could imagine something better and do that with, linked arms with all of humanity, they would be a force to be reckoned with. They would rock the very foundation of fear on this planet. And then we need to refuse to give our creative life force away to fear-based futures, right? It does look bleak sometimes out there when we look around, but don't give your power away to that bleak future, because you are creating it, right? So Mars conjunct Pluto in Aquarius isn't about destruction so much as it's about concentrated will. What will you put your very formidable willpower to? And through Gate 41, that will is being asked to be used toward imagining a better future, to the future we want to live in, that we want to birth, not just to react to the one we're afraid of. This is the difference between revolution driven by rage and evolution guided by action. Significant difference. So this transit reminds us that the most powerful force that we have is not control. It's imagination aligned with integrity. What we imagine together becomes the future that we move toward, and not the nightmare that we move toward. So, what are you willing to do? Okay. Jana says, my natal Mars is at Gate 41.2, feeling big transitions, right? Imagining your future, what could be. Christine Buckingham, I need to find the old funny movie Mars Attacks and watch it again. And there we go. We need to believe our own eyes and not their lies. There's that too. And trust me when I say it's on both sides. If in a polarized world, which seems pretty polarized at the moment, there are so many other facets that we are refusing to see or neglecting to see. So we have to be able to do that. We have to be able to see the whole thing. Now let's go quickly as the last 6 minutes here to the new Human Design Week, which actually begins on the 28th on Wednesday, the same day that Mars conjuncts Pluto. How interesting is that? Where the sun moves into the Gate 19 Attunement. And the gate 19 lives in the root center, and it heightens sensitivity to people, to environments, to needs, and to emotional undercurrents. We all become lightning rods for emotion here. But this is the gate that feels what's needed. It feels what's missing. And it also can feel what's no longer sustainable. And at the gene keys level, the gate 19 moves through the shadow of codependence to the city of sacrifice through the gate of sensitivity, or through sensitivity, which is the gift. And the sun here doesn't just make us more sensitive to emotional energy, it asks us to tap into the future. It's almost like we can read the future during this particular week. That's why it's also still part of the dream time, right? It's still part of this time where maybe it's not set in stone yet where we go. That where we go and what happens is still up for grabs based on what it is that we're focusing our energy on. But we're asked to become more consciously sensitive, not just reactively sensitive, but consciously sensitive. There's a big difference between absorbing everything and listening wisely to what it is that's happening. And this week, you might feel more impacted by the news, by other people's emotions, by worldly events, by the collective grief or anxiety that is out there, by your own unmet needs, right? Because the gate 19 reminds us that sensitivity is not a weakness, it's actually information. As we go through the solar plexus evolution next year, it really is about how we begin to use emotional energy as information, not something that we react to, but something that taps us into something more. And this is also a gate that asks for discernment, in that what is mine to respond to and what is not, right? Now, the earth, remember, in this combination is always going to be what we need to ground in, and the gate 33, the gate of retelling. So the earth shows us how to stay grounded, and the gate 33 does this through reflection and retreat. It actually steps back. And gate 33 lives on the throat center, so it also has a voice. And it's not about speaking everything. It's not about just blurting everything. It's about knowing when and how to tell a story. And at the gene keys level, the gate 33 moves through the shadow of forgetting. We've forgotten our divinity, to the gift of mindfulness, getting back in our right minds. And then at the highest expression becomes revelation, right? Seeing something more. This is the wisdom of the pause, right? So we have to ground ourselves by not being reactive to or sensitive to the things that are going on around us, but by stepping back and saying, what have I lived through? What have I learned? And what story do I want to carry forward, right? What story? Not every story needs to be shared. Some need to be integrated first. Before we start to tell the history of this particular epic in our lives, we are going to need to sit with it and reflect, to find meaning in it. And the alchemy of this particular pairing, the gate 19 and the gate 33, forms a beautiful rhythm of energy, from feeling deeply to reflecting honestly, and then choosing consciously what we're going to repeat. This is not a week for us to rush decisions. This is not a week for us to leap, right? It's a week for listening, for digesting and reauthoring. Authoring, right? Authority, reestablishing your personal authority. And especially after the intensity of Neptune and all the things we've talked about there, the Mars-Pluto conjunction, this human design week says slow down, right? And feel what's real and decide what matters, what really matters. So protect your sensitivity this week. Don't dumb it down or numb it down. Don't get overwhelmed by it either. Limit your emotional overload where you can. Walk away from highly volatile situations until things can settle. Journal instead of reacting, right? If you get mad or juiced up or even overly excited about something, journal it, right? Get some of that hyper emotional ism out of the way. Let your insights ripen before you speak it, before you open your mouth. let's get some truth first, right? Gate 19 asks us to feel what's real. It's very relationship oriented. And gate 33 asks us to choose the story that we carry forward. In a loud world, wisdom begins with listening. The gate 33 embodies some listening. And then remembering who we really are, what's truly important. And this week isn't about doing more. It's about listening better, getting deeper. So as we move through this week, it helps to remember something important. And that is, nothing that's happening right now is asking us to be afraid. Stay out of fear. It's asking us to be awake, aligned, and intentional. Neptune returning to Aries reminds us that spirit wants expression through us, but not as a reaction, not as an illusion, but as courage rooted in compassion. That's a big one. Mars and Pluto conjunct in Aquarius remind us that power doesn't belong to systems alone. It lives in shared vision. It's imagination that's aligned with the good of humanity. And the future isn't something that happens to us, because it's something we participate in shaping. You participate in shaping. And as the sun moves through or into that gate 19, and as Earth enters into gate 33 later in the week, we're given a beautiful pause to listen more deeply, to tend to our own sensitivities, and to choose the stories we carry forward with care. Be very careful. This is not a week for force, it's a week for coherence. When you stay grounded in your values, and when you protect your sensitivity, and when you imagine with integrity, and when you use love rather than fear, you become a stabilizing presence in an uncertain world. And that matters more than you know right now. So the future is not built by fear, should not be built by fear, but by imagination guided by love. And you are already a part of that story. Live it now. All right. Well, that is it for me this morning. I think I am going to take some extra time here, and I'm going to draw a card for us. And I'm going to draw a Guide of the Hidden Realms card by Colette Baron Reed. Just feels like we need a guide, something that can get us through these uncertain times. And let me take a look at things here. Thanks, Amy. She said, congrats on your team. It's exciting, right? Football seems so violent at times, but there's just something that the pride that you feel when you see, even in a losing team, one of the funnest things I think is sometimes how the team players hug and respect each other after the win, right? Or after the loss, how they behave, because it's really telling, right? After a war, we don't see that, but in football and in other team games, you see that, right? Where they're congratulating one another. This is a wonderful card. The True Source of Power, card number 18. Just look at that coming up out of the crown, out of the third eye. And it says on the side here, divine will, integrity, power versus force. That card took a while to pop out, but there it is. And let's see, it's card number 18, which is a 9, maybe the ending of something. Let's read this. The key concepts are divine will, integrity, being aware of your impact on the world, power versus force, and self-will run amok. When true power is expressed, it is beautiful to experience. It is not an act of self-will, but a channeling of divine will where you are fully in service to a higher calling. It is a true surrender, a self-forgetting with access to the transformative power to make such an extraordinary change. There is a profound and simple prayer that illustrates this. Thy will be done through me. Relieve me of the bondage of self so I may be better do thy will. I surrender my will to thine. Use me as thou wilt. Amen. It reminds us that we are all here because the universe needs to experience life through us. Trust in the invisible world and remember that your personal efforts or what you see in the material world are not the source of your supply. When you remember God or spirit or conscious universe or whatever name you choose for divine intelligence, when you remember that it is the source of your supply, you will see the synchronicities drawing forth abundance beyond your imagination. You are being invited to remember this sacred technology now. Surrender your wants, your goals, and your desires to a higher power and watch the miracles unfold. Keep walking and trust with all your heart. Now there's a reversed meaning here. When I pulled it out, it came out upright like this. But I'm going to read the reversed just because I think sometimes it gives us something to understand that's happening, as a part of the shadow. So here's the reversed. When something, someone, or an experience is withheld from us, we don't always know how to take no for an answer. Ambition can take over, and we push against the closed door harder and harder to no avail. We think willpower alone can make the things arrive faster and in the exact form we wanted. It's seductive to think you can cajole and manipulate your way through the world. But in the end, even if you got what you wanted, you would rarely be fulfilled. You might not have a full understanding of the consequences of having it all and the responsibilities it may require. Do not chase after what is unavailable. Find an open door. The universe has been trying to show you this is not the way. Life and love do not have to be so difficult. All right. That is it for me today. I do want to remind you that on Wednesday, the 28th, I will be on air here with Tam as we take a look at what's ahead in February, where we have the first of the eclipses of the year and in new signs, right? We've had them across Pisces, Virgo, and it'll be an Aquarian eclipse. Interesting to be sure. Thank you so much, everybody, for showing up for me this morning, for yourself this morning, for the world this morning. I'll see you on Wednesday. Bye for now.